what yesterday I told, S3 bucket is used to save some data. If we made the S3 bucket public, then it will be publicly accessible. If we made it as a private, then it will not accessible by the public. But yesterday I made the bucket public. Still, if I try to download the image, it is showing access denied, right? The reason behind this, the reason behind that is, see, let it load it. Yeah, see, we can create a bucket. Either this is private. Okay, let me scan a little bit. Yeah, see, there are 3 buckets available in my account. So if you see, uh, yeah, what is this man? Yeah, so if you see this, any bucket can be private, any bucket can be public. So here, if you see, first one is the private, second one is a public, this third one also public. Okay, but what happened? Let's say this one I made it as a public. I'm going inside that. There is no file, and I'm uploading. I'm uploading 2 files. Okay, and so let's say 2 screenshot I'm uploading. So just add all and everything is here. Okay, so and upload. Let it load. Okay, it is uploaded. See, 2 files are uploaded to this bit bucket. Sorry, uploaded to this S3 bucket. Okay, now the bucket name is AWS 7 Learning 1, and there is 2 files uploaded yesterday. But if you see, this bucket is public only. Okay, because in this bucket we have made that option, right? So if you go into the create bucket, there is option called block all public access. I'm removing that. I'm created that bucket. So by removing that, there is no blockage for public. It will be accessible by public. But if it is accessible by public, I should have used this URL. I should have downloaded this image, right? But if you click there, it is saying access denied. Okay, this is what happened with us yesterday. This is because, let's say, this is clear that bucket is public. But suppose in some scenarios, what happen? Even though bucket is public, I don't want all the files inside this bucket to be public. I want, suppose only I want this to be public, this to be private. Like that I want to do. Sometimes that case is needed, right? Let's suppose if the bucket is private, then we no need to worry about anything, because if the bucket is private, none of the file inside can be accessible from outside. But if we made the bucket public, uh, sometimes we might need, not all the files inside the bucket should be accessed to public. Some files can be accessed to public, some files can be accessed to private. Okay, in such a case, what happen? If you want to make particular file or particular some files want to public, 2 steps we need to do. One, we need to make the bucket itself public. That we have already done. Then second, we need to add one more level of permission for the file also inside. Bucket is public, bucket is made public, but inside that, for the files also we need to make it public. Whatever the files are made public, that files can be downloaded. So two things, public should be accessed for bucket also, and what are the files you have added inside the bucket also. 2 steps we need to do to make the files downloadable, okay, or accessible from the public. So first step we have already done. Buckets, this bucket we already created with removing block all public access. Now I'm going to do, this first file I want to make it as a public. It should be accessed from outside. The second one I want to let it be, I don't want the outside to be accessed. Okay, so let's see how I can do that. Just to click the file. Actually, instead of going in the file, in the bucket itself, permission is there. Click on the permission. Okay. See, bucket policy. We already see the word policy in the IAM, right? What is policy? Policy is a rule that it defines which can access which one, or which should not access which one. So that kind of rule you can write in the policy. Similarly, S3 bucket also have the policy. Here you need to mention what are the files should be accessible from the public, or what are the files should be accessible, should not access from the public in the public bucket. Okay. So how we will write the public policy? Okay, just click on edit bucket policy, and here we need to write some JSON file. But since we are most of the people not comfortable with writing the code and writing the file, right? So AWS is giving policy generator. The generator will automatically generate the policy for you as per your decision. So I'm going into the policy generator. Which service? S3 bucket only I'm creating policy, and I am allowing the file to be downloaded. Principal should be, so the principal should be star. I will tell what is the star, but don't worry. And action should be get. There are a lot of actions. See, this is nothing but if you select delete bucket, then what you are telling, from public you can delete the bucket. So from public you can delete the bucket policy. These are the rule. But what we need from outside, we can able to get the that S3 files. Okay, so which means it is also not here. Where is that get S3? Get object. Object means, object is nothing but whatever the files inside the S3 bucket, that is known as object. So I'm giving get object, which means I can get the files in this bucket from outside. I'm allowing. And ARN name is nothing but the bucket have one ID, right? I already told. Every instance, EC2 machine have instance ID, and everything have every ID, right? So S3 bucket also have the ID in the form of ARN. Just to copy this and do this and slash. Okay, slash stop. Now that's it. Everything is done. Add statement. Generate policy. Now you see this text is created as per your commands. Just to copy this. Go back. Now paste this in this policy. After that, save changes. Now it see this is become publicly accessible. This red color mark will come. Then only it is saying that whatever the policies you mentioned, that files and all accessible from outside. Okay. So if you see, now I'm going. See this public mark come here. I'm going inside. I'm just clicking this. Sorry, not okay. Any file is fine. I'm opening both the files. Okay, both files, not this one. Yeah, here URL is there. I'm clicking that URL. See that image is open. This is the image I have uploaded. Okay, I'm going for another one and I'm clicking this URL. See, this is also worked. Okay, so both the images are publicly accessible. So why now I will show you how both images are publicly available. But what is our goal? Only one images I want to make it public. This one should not available to the public. So what we can do? Go to the permission. Here it is saying. So I will tell the meaning of this. Okay. SED is just a policy ID number. Effect allow. Allow means what action you are doing. For you are creating policy for allowing or denying. I want to allow. And the principal store means, so it is saying all kind of access you can give to this get object. So principal store means it is like all kind of access you are giving to this to download the files. Okay, and action is get S3 object. Get object means you are getting the S3 files. Object means the files under S3 bucket. This resource is nothing but this is the ID of the S3 bucket, and you are giving slash star. Star means all the files inside this S3 bucket will be allowed and can be accessed from anyone for this rule. That's what this rule is mentioning. So this, if you define this policy in a single line, the inside this bucket, all files for all kind of access, it is allowing to download the file. That's what it is. Now I don't want all the files to be accessible from outside. I want this file only should be accessible from outside. Okay, so I'm doing copy this name and come here with permission. So let's say I am editing this. Edit this. Instead of star, what I'm going to do, I'm going giving only this. Okay, now let's save changes. Okay, okay, cool. So now coming to the objects, let's say this only we made public, right? Let's try again. happen. I'm opening this and this. So if you click this is access denied. If you click this is opening. See, whatever thing we give the permission, we removed the star and we directly give this file name. So if you give this file name, and the policy will be only applied to this file name. What policy we applied? Allow policy. For what allowing? For all the principal, all get object. Okay, so we are getting this object only for this name we allowed. See here, this one we did not give in the role, so it is saying access denied. Okay, so at the end, if you want to make the files accessible to the outside world in the S3 bucket, you need to go through two steps. One, while creating the bucket itself, you need to make the bucket publicly accessible. Two, you need to generate one policy to allow what are the files you want to access from outside world. This is how you make the files publicly available. So if I share this URL to you, you all guys can able to access this because it is publicly available. Give me a second. Where it is? You can download and check. This can be accessible from anywhere. So, so that's all about S3 public bucket. Okay. So can we move to Docker? Or any doubts here? And you can identify which bucket is publicly accessible using this. See here itself, you can see. Let's open this and go to permission. I'm editing permission and I'm removing all this permission. I don't want any permission. This is how it was initially, right? I'm making the test like that. Now see, under this public icon is gone. Now if you come here, if you see, objects can be public. It is not actually public. It is saying objects can be public because currently the bucket is made to public, but inside that the files are not public. So that's why it is mentioned as object can be public. But if you if you generate the policy and make the files inside the bucket also public, then it will become like this red mark public. You can identify which is the public, which is partially public, which is not public using this access level, access column. Okay. So anyway, let me delete all. Delete. Must be empty. Okay, I need to delete all the files inside. Then only I can delete the bucket. Delete. Just delete the buckets. And I'm deleting this. Okay, access point also okay. Cool. It's deleted. Fine. This one I will delete later. Let me sign out. Okay. So let's start with Docker. Okay. So before entering into the what is Docker, I will give you one short introduction on virtualizations. Okay. Not a bigger one, just it will take just 2 minutes time to introduce. So anyway, these are the topics we are going to see under the Docker. I will come one by one. First, let's say virtualization. Okay. The word virtual means what it is saying. It is like look like real. That is known as virtual. Okay. So what happened? So let's say I will tell what is a virtualization. Okay. Suppose you have the system, right? And you are having Windows operating system in your machine. Okay. So what you want to do in this Windows operating system, you want to use Linux operating system. Okay, but since already you have using Windows, you can't install Linux. That was initial problem. But what happened? There is some concept called virtualization come into the picture. You may have the Windows operating system, but inside that you can install one software called VirtualBox. In that VirtualBox, what you can do, okay, sorry. So if you have Windows, okay, in this operating system you want to install Linux, okay. So what you can do, you can install the software called VirtualBox. In the VirtualBox, you can run the Linux. So at the time, Windows operating system also will be there, and within the Windows OS, within this VirtualBox software, you can use the another OS called Linux. Okay, so within single machine, single computer, you can use two OS. Okay, so how it is possible? Let me tell you how it is possible. Okay, first thing, what is OS actually? OS is to manage your application and manage your resources. Resources means CPU, disk, RAM, those kind of, and processor, everything is a resources. So operating system is the basic software. It will help to allocate the resources such as CPU, disk, everything to your application. Let's suppose in Windows, if you're using Excel, Excel will tell the operating system, I need some memory, I need some disk space, I need some CPU processing. So what OS will do, it will allocate some hardware to the Excel software. That is the basic process of the operating system. Okay. Now what happened? If currently the operating system is only Windows. Okay. Now what happen if you install the virtual box? It will the virtual box create one process called hypervisor. Okay, what this hypervisor will do, this hypervisor will get the commands from the OS, and hypervisor what it will tell before it start the OS Linux itself, it go to the hardware and tell, okay, hardware is using full hardware is using for operating system Windows, but what hypervisor will tell, don't use full hardware for the Windows only, allocate some for the Linux, like that it will tell to the hardware. So what the hypervisor will do, in this full hardware only, it will take just a small amount of hardware resources for the Linux. Rest of the hardware it will be utilized for the Windows. So that what happened, the hypervisor allocated some part of hardware, right? Some part of hardware means some part of CPU, some part of RAM, some part of disk space. Okay, and that will be allocated to the hypervisor. So when the new OS triggered, whatever data this OS also, what is again, what is OS? OS want to allocate the resources to the application, correct? So now this OS will contact hypervisor. I want CPU. So the hypervisor already has the CPU, right? Anyway, the hypervisor don't have the full CPU usage. Okay, it have one small amount of CPU in this hardware. It will give the some part of the small CPU to the OS, some part of the disk space to this OS, some part of the RAM to this OS. Remaining disk, remaining CPU, remaining RAM, it will be given to this Windows OS. Okay, in that way we can run two operating system in single machine. This is known as hardware virtualization, because for this Linux, what it is thinking, the Linux OS, I am the only OS running on this machine. Why it is think like that? Because it has its own CPU, own disk, own what is that? Own memory. Okay, own RAM. It don't know that this RAM and disk and then memory is just a part of the one bigger one. It think that small part is the only thing available. So it thinks, okay, I have my own CPU, I have my own file system, disk and RAM. So I am the only OS running on this machine. It will be run like that. Okay, so it is known as hardware virtualization. So what this hypervisor do? It make the hardware virtually available to this OS and make it believe that you are the separate computer. That is no one else is running. This is your virtually, it is cheating this OS Linux. It is thinking that this is the only OS running. But allocated actually maximum resources in the hardware. But this OS don't know that Windows is running on this, because the hypervisor make it faking by which artificially by virtualize the some part of the hardware. This process of making the virtualization of hardware is known as hardware virtualization. Okay, and the main operating system is known as host OS, and whatever you are running using the VirtualBox hypervisor is known as guest OS. Okay, here this Linux is a guest OS. So now, anyone have a doubt? What is virtualization?
No, sir.
Okay, this is clear, right? Okay. Cool. So let me tell you what is the uses of virtualization. So you guys itself tell what is the use of virtualization to work on the different OS in the single machine when needed. Suppose you guys are learning the Docker, AWS and all, right? So you guys need to work on Linux sometimes, right? You guys are using Windows, but you want to work on Linux sometimes. So you want the Linux OS. At the same time, you don't want to lose the Windows. In that case, what you can do, you can set up on VirtualBox software in your Windows, and within the VirtualBox software you can create one Linux OS. Okay. Next, second usage is to migrate the applications or data to the another system. What does it means is, for suppose you created one application which will be only run on the Linux operating system, not Windows. Okay. But your server is running on the Windows. Okay. So what you can do, you created application which will be only supported by Linux, but your server is Windows. Then how you will run the code in the Windows? Using this virtualization, you can install one virtual box there and run the Linux system. In that Linux OS you can run your application. Let's suppose tomorrow if you want to move this your application to the another machine. Let's say this Windows machine is going to die, okay, or it have very less memory, very less RAM. You want to move your application to the bigger machine. You don't need to worry about anything. The virtual box, you can, using the virtual box, you can migrate the whole Linux operating system to the new machine. Because in this Linux is just a guest OS, it is just virtualizing the hardware, right? So you can simply copy this full system OS to the new machine in the new virtual box in another machine. So the data migration will be very easy in the virtualization. So for these two things, and also many usages, you can use the virtualization, but these two are the primary usage. Okay. Now let's come into the disadvantage of the virtualization. Okay. Since the virtualization needs to run more than one OS, suppose, okay, you have Windows, okay, you install VirtualBox, you install Linux. Linux means not direct Linux. Within the Linux, there are lot of sub OS are there. For example, Ubuntu is one of the Linux OS, Red Hat is one of the Linux OS, CentOS is one of the Linux OS, Fedora is one of the Linux OS. There are a lot of Linux OS. How in Windows, Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows 10, 11 is the right. Similarly, Linux, there are a lot of variation. Suppose you want to run two Linux on the machine. Then what happen? This hypervisor have one more, it will create one more guest OS called CentOS. This another one guest OS called Red Hat, like that. It will create two guest OS. But in this case, what happened? Let's say your hardware is 4 GB RAM and 100 GB disk. For running this OS itself, forget about application inside this Linux. Just to create this OS Linux, it needs some RAM, right? Already the hardware is having only 4 GB RAM. Let's consider for one OS to run the one Linux, 1 GB RAM is allocated to this. Okay, and some 10 GB of disk is allocated to this OS. Okay, already 1 GB of RAM is completed. Next, if you want to create another OS here, what will happen? Another 1 GB is allocated to this, another 10 GB will be allocated to this. But you remember, we not even started to run any application in this OS. We just installing the OS. Okay, for installing itself, this much hardware is utilized. So this is like a resource waste. Suppose you, yesterday you guys are running some shell scripting, right? Let's suppose you want to run the shell scripting in the Linux. Okay, but you have only Windows system. So what you are using, you are installing on virtual box and you are installing one operating Linux operating system. Then in that Linux operating system you are running shell scripting. Okay, but for running shell scripting, you just need the at least a minimum what 1 KB of RAM or 8 bytes of RAM, or just 1 KB of disk space. That only you need for that running single script. But how much resources you are wasting? 1 GB of RAM, like 10 GB of hard disk. That one is wasted for only OS. Then in that OS, you are just going to run one shell scripting. Okay, to run one shell scripting, you are wasting these much resources. So these are the some disadvantages of the virtualization, mainly unwanted resource allocations. So for running small process, it is occupying more hardware resources because OS, what is why it is needed more resources? Because OS itself will take more resources, not the application inside this OS. This installing the OS itself will take lot of hardware. So this knowing this disadvantage is very important to move into the next Docker. Okay, but do you have any doubts in the disadvantage of the virtualization? Advantages is fine, but you guys should understand why what is the disadvantages of the virtualization. Then only you can understand the Docker. Any doubt on the disadvantages? Everyone is clear? Or can you tell one more time?
Tell one more time, sir.
Yes, no. The hardware, okay? Hardware contain in 100 GB disk, 4 GB RAM. Okay, that's it, enough. Okay, you having Windows OS. Suppose OS is also Windows OS is also software, right? Forget about the software running inside the Windows. You just installed Windows. It's a fresh machine. You installed Windows OS. There is no application running in the OS. But for running the Windows OS itself, it will take what happened. It will take 3 GB of disk, 1 GB of RAM. Okay. Now, how much it is remaining? Remaining is 97 GB is remaining free, and 1 GB of RAM is remaining. Okay, let's see. And then again, you are going to run some application like MS Excel you are installing in the Windows. MS Excel need 1 GB of disk and just 0.5 of GB of RAM. Then again, here 6 GB available because 1 GB is used by Excel, and okay, 1 GB is wasted, 3 GB allowed, and now 2.5 GB is available remaining. Okay, this is how the normal OS in hardware is accessing the resources such as disk and RAM. Now, what you are going to do, you are going to run one shell scripting. Okay, but the shell scripting can be run in only Linux machine, but you are having Windows machine. So, what you can do, you can install VirtualBox. VirtualBox is a software name to create a virtualization. Inside that, create one Linux OS. The Linux OS will run inside this VirtualBox. Okay. Linux also OS, right? It is similar to Windows. Let's say Linux also will take 2 GB of disk, 1 GB of RAM. Okay. Now Linux OS is created. Now Windows also there and Linux also there. Okay. Now what you can do? Before that, VirtualBox, there is one concept called hypervisor. Hypervisor is responsible to allocate the resource to this guest OS. Okay, hypervisor. So hypervisor already told the hardware, see, I am going to run on Linux OS. Don't give everything to the Windows. Allocate some like what 10 GB for Linux, 10 GB disk for Linux, and 1 GB RAM for Linux. Okay. So what it is saying, hypervisor is telling hardware out of 96 GB remaining for Linux, please save some 10 GB and save some 1 GB of RAM. Okay, it is telling for Linux this hardware. Now what is the remaining is available? 86 GB because 10 GB is allocated for Linux. Now only 1.5 GB. This is allocated. Now you created Linux OS. Out of this 10 GB, 2 GB is allocated. Out of this 1 GB, 1 GB also allocated. Now in this Linux, you are running your shell scripting. Okay. How much data this shell scripting running will take? 1 KB. KB is very less. So if you 1024 KB is a 1 MB, 1024 MB is a 1 GB, which is very small. Okay, only 1 KB of disk is needed and 0.002 GB of RAM is required. Okay. See, now to run this single shell scripting, which only need 1 KB and 0.02 of RAM is required, how much you are wasting? For Linux OS, 2 GB of disk, 1 GB of RAM. And hypervisor, anyway, it is not wasted, but it is already tell the hardware, don't use 10 GB of disk, 1 GB, it will be only usable by Linux. Okay. And only to have 86 GB remaining in your main hardware, and this 86 GB only used by the Windows OS. Rest of the things will be used by this Linux OS. See, to run 1 KB of file, we are wasting almost 10 GB of 10 GB of space. So it is the wastage of resource, right? That is the main disadvantages of the virtualization. Understand? Any doubts? Because you want to run only this one, but you need to create OS will take a lot of space, and hypervisor also will tell the hardware to lock some this much space. To run single cell scripting, why we need to allocate this many spaces, right? That is disadvantage, right? So you guys understand what is the disadvantage?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Dinesh.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you understand, right? What is virtualization and disadvantage? Hmm. So who else? Chaitanya, you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I'm moving to the next one. This one called containerization. Okay. Let's see. Now we have one problem. What is the problem? To running simple application, we need to create a OS, and it is taking lot of amount of space. It is a wastage of resource. Now I want to solve this problem. What I'm going to do? Okay, the shell scripting will only on Linux. So we are installing Linux OS. But instead of installing whole Linux OS, what if we only create whatever the things which is needed to run the shell scripting? Okay, let's say in the Linux OS there are a lot of small libraries and many small softwares, many small files are installed, right? That only have, make the shell script is running. Let's say A is one of the library, B is one of the library, C is one of the library. Library means it is just a Linux library means the Linux repository, how we can tell. You can consider library is the file or coding which is making the Linux OS running. Okay, so there are lot of libraries combinedly and running the Linux OS. Okay, you can consider library is a small piece of code, using that they created the Linux OS. Okay, let's say there are three libraries available in the Linux OS: A, B, C. This all combinedly called Linux OS. What if to run the shell scripting only C is needed, A, B is not needed? So what I'm doing, I am just getting the C and wrap this whole C and then shell scripting in one folder known as, or you can say one packages. Okay, if so to run the shell script, the C library is sufficient. I don't want the whole OS. Remove the whole OS. Removed. Now what happened? 2 GB, what's up? 2 GB is saved, 1 GB RAM is saved, because that A and B and all not needed. I want only C. Okay. Now the OS itself is not needed, because why we need OS? For ABC, but in that we only needed C. We removed AB, we removed the Linux OS. So what it will do? Already Windows OS is there. Okay, so Windows OS can able to interact with the hardware. What this will do, the C is already there, which is enough to run the shell scripting. The C will run on the Windows OS instead of running on the Linux, because the C know how to run the shell scripting. It doesn't need the Linux OS. Okay, so the C knows how to run on the Windows OS. So we don't need the hypervisor also, we don't need the virtual box also. We just need C and then shell scripting, because C is a library which know how to run the shell scripting. We don't need depend on any of the OS on how to run the shell scripting. Only C is the library which is needed to run the shell scripting. Okay, in that case, we can these things can be saved, and these things can be saved. See, now 96 GB space is available. Why? Only reason, we removed the dependency of the guest OS. Guest OS means the OS inside the virtual machine. We removed that. We only collect what are the things which is needed to run our application, and unwanted things we removed. Okay, so after removing, using these things, C itself, we can run this. We removed unwanted things, so we can remove these much resources using Windows OS itself. Windows don't know how to run the Linux scripting, but Windows OS tell the C, okay, C, you know how to run, right? You take care of this. You just send me the signal, what are the things I need to do. So C will tell Windows, you need to run like this, you need to run like this, because it's a Linux. Windows don't know. So C is telling the Windows, you need to run like this, you need to run like this. So Windows will execute this shell scripting. Okay, in that case, the OS is not needed. We can save this much amount of space. So you are packing the C and run shell scripting in one folder or one singularity called package, right? You can call that folder or package or the word known as container. So packing the application you want to run, and packing the libraries which used to run the application, okay, in the single package called the container, and the process is known as containerization. Okay, it is a process of pack all the dependencies needed for running the application into single package, is known as containerization. It's the first. Containerization is same as virtualization. It is also same as virtualization. Only difference is, instead of sharing the hardware resources, so what that hypervisor did, that let me show you the diagram. What here the hypervisor is doing, it is directly occupying the hardware. So what happens if you occupy some of the hardware? This Windows will get only small amount of hardware, which will result into the slow operation of the Windows. But in containerization, see, it is not occupying the directly hardware. It is telling the Windows only to execute this shell scripting. So Windows only at the end it's going to use the hardware. There is no other OS like Linux and are going to use the hardware. Windows is the only OS is going to use the hardware. So everything will be allocated to Windows OS itself. So that's what here's mentioning. Containerization is same as the virtualization. Only difference, instead of sharing the hardware resources, which means instead of that process directly access the hardware, it will share the host OS. What is a host OS? In our example, it is Windows to run the application. So that guest OS is not required, which means the Linux OS is not even required. And that's why it became lightweight, because it removed a lot of weight like OS and hypervisor, everything, right? So it became lightweight. You guys understand what is containerization? Okay. Can you anyone explain what is virtualization?
Within a single computer, we can have two OSs, sir.
Okay. How we can install two OS?
And another one is guest OS.
Yeah. Okay. So guest OS, by using what the guest OS is running.
What's that?
So you said multiple OS can run on the same machine, right? How?
Called, called virtualization. Virtual box software is used to do all this.
Yes. And
In this
hmm,
in this hyper this high in this hypervisor will allocate some space in hardware.
yes. So hypervisor will directly speak to the hardware. It asks the hardware to allocate some space to the guest OS. So the guest OS can use that hardware to run the OS.
Yes, sir.
Inside that OS, you can use it as a normal system, Linux. That is the
Yes,
virtual.
concept.
Yeah. Okay, good. Can anyone else, other people can tell what is the disadvantage of the virtualization?
It's a wasting of the memory.
Yes. And why it is a wasting of not only wasting of memory of all kind of resources, disk,
Uh,
CPU, everything. But
yes.
why it is a wasting?
Uh, it separately allocated some memory to the guest OS.
Yes,
So
yes.
we want to run some particular application. Uh,
Hmm.
it's not using that much of memory. We don't need it.
Yes, because for running smaller application, why we need to install full OS itself, right?
Yes.
It's a wastage of memory. Now, how we can resolve this issue using containerization? How containerization solve this issue? Can any other people can tell? Dinesh? Okay. How about Yogesh? Yogesh, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you tell how containerization solve the disadvantages of the virtualization?
Container, it is what we need for resources for the particular forming
Hmm.
of OS will be present. All the packages will be present in the particular disk set. So
Yeah.
other disks forming will be resolved so that we can. Uh,
What is disk here? Actually, there is no disk. It is you are telling about libraries. Okay, I will tell. So in virtualization, you need the full OS to run the particular application, right? So instead of using the full OS, we are just packaging what are the things only needed by the application in that OS. Because OS is the collection of many process, like file system, many small software is combinedly created the OS. But all small softwares are not needed to run a small application, right? So whatever that small application needed, let's suppose for running one application, you created one application. It is running on Linux OS. Okay. What is OS actually? It is a combination of many small software. Software called A is one of the software, B is one of the software, C is one of the software, D is one of the software, E is one of the software. The OS is nothing but it's a combination of many smallest software. But among this, all these small software is not needed to run this application. So let's say only C and D is need to used to run this application. So instead of completely create the whole Linux OS, which is A, B, C, D, E, we only collect C and D and remove this Linux OS and only have the dependency C and D in a package. That package known as container. So in this case, we no need to install full Linux OS. It knows how to run the application. It will tell the host OS itself how to run the application. Okay, so we are saving a lot of resources. This process is known as containerization. It's a packaging of your application and the dependency. Dependency means your application is dependent on which libraries. Libraries are also known as the code for the software. It knows how to run your application. Okay, this is known as containerization. Oh. Yeah, see here there is no guest OS, only host OS and container within the host. Let's suppose you want to run one Java software. Java software might need only libc, clib, so this kind of software of the Linux OS. So instead of installing whole Linux OS, you are just to set up only this package in a single container, and this container will be run directly on the host OS. It don't need any guest OS. So that is known as containerization. Now, let's come into what is Docker. Simple. This containerization is a process, right? Using this technology, Docker is the company, software name, company name, everything is same only. So Docker is the software name which is offer this containerization. Because I told you this is the container, it will only have the application under dependency which is needed. But who will create the container? Who will put the application under this dependency in a single package called a folder or whatever it is? This Docker software will do. If you tell the Docker, I want to run the Java application, This Docker knows what are the components needed to run the Java. So it will pack and it will create one single package called a container. That's what known as Docker. So we are going to see how Docker is doing this whole containerization, how Docker is doing. That's what we are going to see. So now virtualization containerization is done. What is Docker is done. Now next thing is Docker image, container, volume, Docker repo. Okay. So before that, I will show you. You guys need to install the Docker by logging into the website. See, just go to the Google, just install Docker for Linux or Mac or Windows. As of now, only Windows 10 have the Docker. Okay. If you want to run other Windows, if you want to run Docker on other Windows, it will again install the VirtualBox only. But VirtualBox again come into the virtualization. Anyway, it don't have any advantages of the Docker. But if you want to learn the Docker, you can just install on other Windows. But direct Docker is as of now, it is available on Linux or Mac or Windows 10. Okay. I have already downloaded for Mac. I'm opening that. Okay. See, there are some container. Let me. These are not needed. Deleting this. So this is just a Docker. But after you download a Docker, the first thing you need to set up is this login. Okay. So I'm logging out. First, this is the if you open the Docker, it will be look like this. First, signing into the Docker. Docker is nothing but how Gmail and all there, right? Similarly, Docker also have one centralized website. There you need to log in. Okay, I will tell why you need to log in this. Okay, first time logging in. If you don't have any account, you need to create one. Okay, okay, I made forgot my password. Let's see, it is working or not. Okay, it is working. So I logged into the account. But why this account login is needed, you will understand. Okay. So first let's understand what is Docker image. Okay. Fine. Can anyone tell what is the image in AWS?
It comes in AMI, sir.
Yes, yes. So what is the use of AMI?
It copies the
Hmm.
instance.
Yeah, correct. So what it will do, it just to copy the whole running instance, the same. So whatever data, whatever process it's running, it just take the exact copy of that machine. Okay. It is so. What is image? It is a photo, right? A photo. What you are doing? You are taking your camera and taking the photo, right? However you are standing, however you are speaking, the same moment it is capturing, right? Similarly, image Docker image or AWS AMI image is nothing but you are taking the exact moment how the system is exactly at that moment. You are taking the copy from that image. If you create any new machine in AWS, it will be exactly like that image you copied. Okay. Similarly, the same meaning Docker also have. Let's suppose what is that? Yeah. Here Docker have so in AWS how we create a fresh machine. Amazon initially itself give the Linux OS, Red Hat OS, CentOS OS, all images it is give by Amazon itself. Using that image, we will create a machine which may contain Red Hat, CentOS or whatever OS you want, right? So how it is initially created because AWS by default give one image for CentOS, one image for Fedora, one image for Linux or Red Hat, whatever it is. Using that image, whatever OS we want, we will create one EC2 machine. Okay, this is how AWS work. Similarly, Docker also. Suppose if you want to, let's say any application, if you want to run, anybody heard of the MySQL database? Okay. If not, then what example I can give? Okay, let's take MySQL. MySQL is nothing but it is like a database software. It is just a software. Okay. Suppose you want to that software can be run only on Linux. Okay, you created. So what happened? But you have only Windows or different OS. Okay. So but if you want to run MySQL, what you can do? The Docker company itself is providing the image to run the MySQL. You can simply download the image and you can create a container out of it. Okay, let me show you. This is just a demo. Don't worry if you don't understand. I will just because if I show the demo, then if I explain, then only you will understand. Okay, let's go to image. So now you can delete. So what I'm going. So this remote repository is nothing but it is searching the internet for the image. Okay, I am going to search any search option is here. Okay, directly search here. Okay, this is my repository. Let's go to here. See, this is the so you need to use the terminal only again. Here it goes. Docker pull. I am pulling the MySQL image from the internet. Don't worry, I know you guys don't understand what I'm doing, but just I'm explaining what is Docker. That's it. I will explain everything clearly in upcoming. It's just downloading the MySQL image. Okay, so it is downloaded. Go to here. See, MySQL is downloaded. I'm going to run this. So not internet, just to run. Yeah, see what it is showing. Let's go to containers. It is running. MySQL is running. Okay, so this MySQL can be run only on the Linux. But if you see, I am running MySQL on my Mac. This is Apple system. But this is the MySQL running on Linux. Without any Linux OS, I am running the MySQL, which can be running only on the Linux OS. So MySQL is a software which can run on only Linux OS, but I don't have Linux OS. Still, I can run MySQL. That is because this is the container. So this is the container name. In this container, it have in this container it have all the libraries packages which is needed to run the MySQL. So using this packages, using Docker, I can run this container. So this container still contain everything, so I can run this. Okay. Don't forget, don't confuse about what is image container volumes. This is just about what is Docker. I'm running MySQL, which can be run only in Linux, but I can run in my Mac also using the Docker. That is the use of the Docker. That is the use of the containerization. Now let's see detailing what is Docker image, everything. Okay. Docker image. What is Docker image? Okay. Similarly, like AWS, image is the quality of container. Okay. If you want to compare it with AWS, AMI is a copy of EC2 machine. How in AWS EC2 machine you create a copy using AMI. Similarly, you can take a copy of the container in the image, Docker image. Okay. So first, what is container? Container is a actual package where your application and dependency of application is there. So I have already told, right? So in this container, so in this, if you want to run shell scripting, you don't need every OS. You just need only the thing which is needed to run the shell scripting. Similarly, here, if you want to run shell scripting, that is which is application, or if you want to run some MySQL, that is application. And what are the things which is needed to run the application? That is a dependent and the dependency of application in single package known as container. Within this container only this application will run. Okay, and so okay, currently you set up the run the my application, the dependency of my application in the container, and you run the container. Okay, currently container is running. Container is running. Okay, so container is running means my application is running. Okay, the application is running. Okay, now so you are running Google Drive in the application. This application is Drive. Okay, and dependency of the drive also there. The drive container is running. Okay, now what you are doing? You are going to use the Google Drive. Okay, what you can use, you can upload some images. Okay, the images will go directly into this container. But before container have only a plus dependency, now you are uploading some images also to the container. Images also it have, and some videos and files you are saving in the Google Drive. So all things are coming in the container. Now this running container of the Google Drive contain your application and the dependency which is needed to run the application and the files you have uploaded to the Drive applications. Okay, so you can imagine, so you can't imagine, right, what is container. Just imagine container is one of the machine running on the AWS. Okay, and if I take the image of this in EC2, what you will do, you take the AMI of the machine. Similarly, this container you take the Docker image. Okay, now image is created. Now I can create one container from this image. Okay, from this image. So this will be the new container. If you create new container, this will contain whatever this having, not only that app plus dependency, but also will have the images, videos, and files you have uploaded. Okay, and the files you have uploaded, because this container is created from the image and images is taken from the old container which have all this data. So if you create new container from this image, it have all the data where the images is taken. Okay, so at the end, in the simple process, container is the place where your application runs simply, which is Linux application. But this container is running on Linux or Windows or Mac using Docker. Docker image is like an AMI, but you should not use the word AMI. It's like an image taken container. So if you create any container from the image, you will take the you will run the copy of the container. Only two things. Container is simply the package, simply consider it as a box which is created by the Docker software. Inside the container, your Linux application will run. Okay, you can run the container on Windows, Linux, or Apple, but inside the container, the application can be run on Linux. Okay, indirectly, the Linux application you are running on Windows, Mac, or whatever OS. Okay, using the container, and the container is given by the Docker software. And second thing, what is Docker image? You can take the image of the running container, and from the image, you can create any number of new containers, which will be exactly like the old container. Now, can you
Hello. Hello, sir.
okay. Prashant?
Yeah, Praveen.
Yeah, you understand what is container and
Yes, yes, Praveen.
okay. Can you
Yes,
explain me what is container? Docker container?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Okay.
Providing of data to transport it into two parts.
Hmm. Data?
As a
Hmm. Okay. How we can tell? Okay, so you can tell like that. Uh, so you guys know Sigwin?
yes, sir.
Sigwin is the software where you can execute Linux command, right? But on where? Windows OS. Okay. How it work? How Sigwin can execute Linux command on Windows OS? Because Sigwin have all the dependencies to run the Linux commands. Okay, it don't need the actual Linux. It will just know the Linux. So in the normal Linux you are running commands, right? How the commands are running? Because Linux have some softwares, it knows how to run the commands. So the Sigwin have only the particular software, it knows how to run the commands. It don't need the full OS. It needs to know how the Linux commands are running. Okay, so what Sigwin do? It don't have the full Linux OS. It only knows it only have the software which know how to run the Linux commands. Okay, and then in that you can run the commands. That is known as containerization. Okay, Sigwin is the black box, right? Consider Sigwin is the one container. Inside the container your commands you are running, right? That you can run, and whatever the things needed to run the command, that is also in the Sigwin. This is the container. You understand, right? For running Linux command, you did not have the Linux OS itself. You just Sigwin is having just what are the things needed to run the Linux command. This you understand, right? This line. What is
Yes,
Sigwin? Okay. Similarly, Sigwin is running Linux command on the Windows OS because it knows how to. It have the software to run Linux commands. Okay. Instead of Linux commands, I am creating one software like Sigwin. Okay, it knows how to run the let's say one Linux application. There is one Linux application called MySQL which can be running only on the Linux. Okay, consider I'm going to copy. Okay, Sigwin is doing Linux commands, which is only running on Linux, but Sigwin is running on Windows. I'm going to copy the same. What I'm going to do, instead of doing the Linux command on Windows, I'm going to run the MySQL application, which can be only running on Linux. But what I'm doing, I'm taking the copy of the MySQL application, and I'm taking the copy of the what are the things needed to run the MySQL. That I'm packing that in the single box, and I'm running like a Sigwin. Okay, but what my Sigwin will do, it will not run the Linux command, but it will run the MySQL application. That is a Linux application. This is my container. My container will do MySQL application. Sigwin container will do executing the Linux command. So mine is one container, his is one container. But both container don't need the Linux OS. It only need what are the libraries needed to run the Linux application. Clear? What is container? Okay, now you can have the Sigwin, right? I want to take the image of the Sigwin. I want to create one new Sigwin black box. So what I can do, I'm just taking the image of your Sigwin container, and I'm creating new container from that image. So that two Sigwin I have with the same data. This is known as Docker image and Docker. And this Sigwin is not a Docker. It is just a normal container. But within the Docker, we can create a container like a Sigwin. So you guys understand what is Docker container and what is Docker images, right? I'm not going, no, I mean, without, because next two topics we can go further easily if you understand these two things. So anyway, today class will be up to this topic only. So if you guys want to explain some more detail, I'm ready to explain. These two things are important. You can imagine every container is a separate computer. It's not actually computer, but you can imagine like that. So clear, like what is container images? Srinath? Srinath is not available. Who is there? Okay, he's.
Arvind, can you explain once again that?
Yeah. Okay, no problem. Let me show you in the form of diagram. Okay, let's create here. So let's consider this is your computer, okay, and insert is having Windows OS. Okay. Now you so what I'm going to insert other shapes. Let's say I have two machine. Okay, this is your machine. This is my machine. Okay, and this is. This is Linux. Now, Windows can run only Windows application. Linux can run only Linux application. If I want to, so let's say one application, for example, I am adding MySQL is one of the software. Okay, this MySQL can run only on Linux. It can't able to run on Windows OS. But I am asking you to run this MySQL on the Windows OS because I only have the Windows. Linux is my friend computer. Under there, MySQL is running. So I want to run MySQL on my Windows OS. Okay, because I only have Windows. How I can run? First step, either I can install VirtualBox software here. Okay, VirtualBox. What is a VirtualBox? Is used for virtualization. So it will create one Linux OS is there, full OS. Okay, full Linux OS it will install. So now I get the Linux OS. Now I am running the MySQL because MySQL can only run on the Linux OS. Now MySQL will run. But one disadvantage is MySQL is small application. In order to run the MySQL application, I need to install VirtualBox and I need to run the full Linux OS itself. So full Linux OS if you run, it is a waste of resources. It will occupy more CPU, more memory, more disk to run the small application. Okay. But instead of doing this, what I'm doing, and I don't need the Linux. So basically what is Linux OS? It is the software. This OS contains many small software such as example A, it is for example, okay, B, C, D. These many software is commonly known as one OS. OS is not a single software, it is combination of many small processes, small software, okay. But to run this MySQL, it actually need the C and the D. Okay, it's C software and D software. But what I am doing, I'm installing the full OS, which is A, B, C, D, all the software I'm installing. Here A and B is not even required by the MySQL. So what I'm doing, I found a way. So there is one Docker company which is calling me. So Docker company is saying, why you are installing the full VirtualBox and installing the full Linux OS? I will give you one technology. What it will do, it will not use the full OS itself. It will just use only the things which you needed to run the MySQL on the Linux OS. So CND is also the part of Linux OS, but you don't need the full Linux OS. So to run your MySQL, Docker will only use the C and D. Rest of the things it will not use. So it will combine the C and D and MySQL in one small software. This will wrap as a small software. So now this virtual box is renamed by the Docker to small software. This is also software. This is also software. This packaging into single software is known as container. So now what it will do, it don't have the Linux OS. It is using Windows OS only to run the MySQL. But I have already told MySQL can only run on Linux. But how Windows OS run the MySQL? Using this C and D, because C and D is the thing which know how to run the MySQL. This is only available on Linux. So C and D telling the Windows OS, Windows, don't worry, I know how to run the MySQL. Just to follow my instruction. So C and D will tell the Windows OS how to run the MySQL. So as per this instruction, Windows OS will allocate the CPU, memory, and whatever needed to run the MySQL. Previously, it will allocate most of the resources to the full OS itself. But now it is only allocate the memory what is required by C and D. Only small CPU, small disk, okay, and it will run the MySQL. So here the Windows is taking the responsibility by the commands of C and D, which is taken from the Linux. Okay, so MySQL will run on the Windows OS using the CND packages of the Linux. Here the resource will be saved. There is no much resources, only small, whatever the MySQL is needed, that much resource only it will be used. So this combinedly MySQL and CND, it will pack together and it will run as a one separate software. How this is doing? Docker technology will know how to do this, how it will match only this application of MySQL together and run as a separate software. So this container is known as, insert, it's known as MySQL container. This is like one of the software. So Windows OS can run Excel and whatever other software, right? PowerPoint, so those kind of software, right? Similarly, MySQL is also one of the Windows OS. This container knows how to run the MySQL, Linux MySQL, because it have the CND. So this is it is not a OS and all, not a virtualization and all. It is just one software which is created by the Docker by packing CD and MySQL. So you can use the MySQL in the Windows OS itself. This packaging of together into a single software is known as containerization, and it is created by the it is not created by the technology is introduced long before, but nowadays Docker is the famous company which is doing this containerization. Now you guys understand what is container?
Okay.
Clear, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, everyone clear? Okay, so I want to run two MySQL in the same Windows OS. So Docker is giving another option. Docker is telling, okay, you want to run two MySQL? No problem. Just to take the image of the container. Docker is giving one option also to take the image. Okay, so what I'm doing, I am taking one image. It's not a Docker image. In this case, it is a MySQL Docker image. Okay, now image is created. Next time, if you want to create a similar thing, so what you can do, from this image you will create a container. Is similar to this. Okay, you can tell why we need to take the image of this, then we need to create this container. we can create freshly, right? How we created this, similarly we can create this also, right? Why we need to take a copy from this one to this? We can create freshly also, right? If you take freshly, it will be exactly like this, but whatever data exists in here, it won't come here. Suppose, let's say you created this, okay? Forget about Docker image and all. You created this container and start using this container. In this container, you are using MySQL container software, right? In this software, you are saving lot of data. Okay, some data you saved. After 10 days of usage, after 10 days, okay, people are using, many data is saved. You want to create a duplicate of this same along with this data. If you create fresh MySQL container, it is like a new one. You don't have any existing data, but you want to create exact replica of this one, duplicate of this one. Then you can take the image of this. Then if you create a uh, then if you create another container from this image, then it will be exactly contain data also. So this is known as Docker image. Similarly, like an AMA of the AWS. Now you guys understand what is image? Docker image. So only two things I needed from you. You should understand what is Docker container and what is Docker image. That's it. Rest of the things you can easily understand. Because many people struggle understanding what is Docker container and image at the starting. So that's why I'm spending more time on this. Any doubts in the container and image? Any doubts? Chaitanya?
I mean, can we take that
Yeah.
pic?
You
Can
want
we
to start
take that pic? Yes,
this?
yes, yes.
Okay, no problem. Tomorrow I will explain with the diagrams only, okay? So that you guys better understand. I think it is shared in the chat. It can be shared in the chat, right? Okay. Okay, I think. So I think images can't be shared. I think.
Share it on WhatsApp group, sir.
Okay. So Jaipal, I will share to you. So can you share that to the students? Okay, Prasad. Like I will share to Jaipal. He will share to you. The WhatsApp I'm sharing him. He will share to you. Okay. 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 Jaipal, I shared you the image. Please share with all the students. So any doubts? Yogesh, Srilada, Chaitanya.
No, sir.
Okay. So if this
No,
is
sir.
clear, tomorrow onwards we can move a little bit faster. You guys will easily understand. If you guys understand these two concepts, then whole Docker is done. Okay. Okay. So if you are done, we can. If there is no doubts, then we can leave.